Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 6 of Dudes of the Dead. And I'm not even going to tell you what we're doing today because we have a couple of things to get through first.
We do.
So before we begin and do our usual quick cuts, I'd like to give a quick shout out to another local podcaster, to Nanaimo, that I met recently, always on a quest to buy more gear. Anyway,
Who are you?
So his name's David Weeb. He's was a really interesting person to speak with. Author, musician, and a podcaster. And if you'd like to see what he's up to on his website, I got the sense that his, certainly he showed me the book that he wrote. And I think his podcast is kind of about the music industry and entrepreneurship and that kind of stuff. So his podcast, Creativity, Excitement, Emotion is the name of his podcast. And he's also got a website. It's all one word, David Andrew Weeb, WEIBE.com. Anyway, I told him I'd give him a shout out. So there you go, David. Thanks for the microphone. Okay. So am I going to go first for quick cuts?
Quick cuts, whatever you like.
Okay. Well, I have seen a recent one for quick cuts, and have you seen It Lives Inside?
I don't know. Describe it?
It
rings a bell.
A Southeast Asian girl who's trying to fit in.
No, I don't think so. What year is it?
2023.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Yeah, so this flew under the radar, and I was aware of it, but I didn't, for some reason, I didn't see it. And it kind of reminds me of, I didn't take note of where it was filmed, like whether it's a British film or it's a mix. But it is in English. It's not subtitled. But it's kind of like along the same lines as some of those Arabic movies about jinn.
Oh, okay. I think I've heard of this one. Yeah.
So the premise is that there's this, and I'm not, hopefully this won't be taken the wrong way. There's like an ethnic demon. It's something related.
Is it called a jinn?
It's not.
Oh, okay.
I can't remember the name of the demon, but the idea is that this demon feeds on our fears and everything negative. And so the movie is about, she's in high school. She's trying to fit in and trying to be Western, North American, but both of her parents are immigrants, and they seem like they have a fairly traditional home. And she doesn't get along with her mother. It's definitely a coming of age kind of story. But yeah, I think it's worth a watch.
Is it like a slow burn kind of horror?
It's definitely not. I mean, there's a few like, whoa, jump scares, but it's definitely more of a slow burn.
Is it Indian?
Yes.
Okay, I've heard of this one. Yeah.
Yes.
I think I heard good things.
Yeah.
I heard almost like you might appreciate it more as a film than as a horror film. Like maybe it doesn't have too many horror elements, but just enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. Like so many that we talk about are they're crossover, right? Like I wouldn't say it's a full on horror. I mean, the more we do this, the more I'm wondering, are there any full-on horrors anymore? Because everything I watch is like, well, yeah, that's got horror elements, but is it a horror?
Terrifier 2.
Yeah. Terrifier 3 is coming out.
Yes.
I'm starting to question my own, okay, what do I consider to be, like, what am I going to watch that I am going to say, yeah, for sure, that's horror?
Where did you hear about this one? Was it on the
I think I
Rotten Tomatoes list?
No, I don't know. Because I haven't looked at that list in a while. I've been trying to find something else and I haven't been successful. It probably just showed up on Netflix, like on the stream. So
I mean, we're in March. It's been a very slow 2024.
It has indeed.
I don't even think I've yet to watch a 2024 horror film. And I keep wanting to, and there's just nothing looks worth watching.
Well, and I think I might have sent you a message. It's like, is it just me, or is 2024 off to a really slow start?
Yeah.
There's
it
nothing.
Looks like the back end of the year is really overloaded with horror.
Yes. Yeah, for sort of summertime on.
We'll be really busy in the fall. But yeah, I almost wish there was more right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what's your quick cut?
Okay, well, on that note, my quick cut is a little bit of a cheat. Because it's actually a video game. Because there's been no horror movies to watch.
Not you. You wouldn't cheat, would you?
People are going to laugh at me because this is new to me, but I'm sure it is not new to many horror fans out there. Because this game has been out for a long time. This is Dead by Daylight.
Oh, yeah. Isn't it a game?
Yeah, video game.
Yeah, okay.
And the thing that kind of sold me on it is there's a downloadable DLC pack where you get to play as Nicolas Cage.
Oh, I have heard about this.
So the first thing I did was buy Nicolas Cage, and it's amazing and hilarious. So
is it on the Quest?
No,
Oh.
not as of yet. I play it on the Xbox. It's on every other console.
I should have known
think.
that. Yeah.
I'll let you know if it drops on Quest.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm wearing my Nicolas Cage shirt. Maybe we're also doing a film today featuring Nicolas Cage. So I figured this is the perfect quick cut to talk about.
Absolutely.
But this is you can play as a killer or a survivor, and you've got 4 survivors who are running around trying to like power up these generators and escape. And then the killer player is just running around trying to murder the survivors and hang them on hooks, and they try to help each other. It is very cool, and it has lots of horror licenses. So they have Michael Myers and Laurie Strode and Chucky.
I've heard about this
Nightmare on
game.
Elm Street and Pinhead and Chucky. So it's super cool. I downloaded the Michael Myers, Laurie Strode Halloween chapter, and of course Nicolas Cage. It's been super fun. So if you're a horror fan and you've not heard of this game, I'm sure many of you already play this. I'm very late to the party. But if you enjoy horror movies and you want to try a video game that's quite fun, it takes like 10 minutes and it gets your adrenaline pumping. Dead by Daylight.
I wasn't even invited to the party. That's how far behind I am. But if it's on Quest, I would play it, I think, because it sounds pretty cool.
That'd be really creepy in VR, actually. But maybe it'll happen at some point.
Some of the VR, I can't remember the name. So Mike and I were just talking, Maniac and I were just talking about rebuying the Quest because we both had the original Quest.
Yes.
We both sold it. And unbeknownst to either one of us, we both rebought the Quest 2. We couldn't spring.
We're too cheap to pay for the Quest.
We couldn't spring for the 3. So I have yet to. There's a couple of games. There's a haunted house game, and yeah, in VR, like the things where you're walking across rafters and stuff. It's such a weird feeling because you know that the floor is solid underneath you. But visually, you're seeing these rafters. And I remember kind of, like doing this thing where I was trying to find my balance or whatever. And the horror ones are pretty terrifying.
Oh, yeah. Like I almost get no emotional response from films anymore.
Yeah.
In terms of being scared. But virtual reality horror games are freaky because you feel like you're there and totally behind you. And yeah, if you like horror and you think you can handle it, some of the VR horror games are good. Yeah.
Like I would say, some of them are. I mean, I've watched a lot of horror, but I was pretty terrified in a couple of those games. Well, where I was like, okay, I just need to stop and take a breath before I move on. Because they've got jump scares, of course, but they've also got sort of creepy things going on. So for sure.
So anyways, a slight departure from film today, but
that's all right. We'll because it's Nicolas Cage, we'll let you put that in there.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Okay, so I've given my shout out. Now we will tell you what we're doing today. So today we're looking at, and forgive me looking at my phone. I normally have like a tablet thing, but anyway, it's a long story. So 2018, we're doing Nicolas Cage and Andrea Riseborough, I think are the two, and that's Mandy.
Can we just...
Under the crimson, primordial sky, the wretched warlock reached into the dark embrace. His fist closed around the serpent's eye. Strange and eternal.
I need you to get me that girl I saw. Do you know what to do? You're a special one, Mandy.
Can we just take a moment to appreciate that this was Leatherface's pick?
I picked
the first time he picked a Nicolas Cage film, and it wasn't me, but I'm pretty excited.
Because I haven't watched this since we watched it summer of 2018. Anyway, so this is Panos Cosmatos, director. He did Behind the Black Rainbow, and he's also been part of Guillermo del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities.
Oh, cool.
So the 3 main actors in this one, although you'll recognize some other ones, Nicolas Cage, Andrea Riseborough, and Linus Roach. So this is 6.5 on IMDb and a 91% critic score though on Rotten Tomatoes, 67. We seem to have a knack for choosing films that critics like, but maybe the audience doesn't. So
I can see it.
I can see it too. So summary. In the Pacific Northwest in 1983, Outsiders Red Miller and Mandy Bloom lead a loving and peaceful existence. When their pine-scented haven is savagely destroyed by a cult led by the sadistic Jeremiah Sand, Red is catapulted into a phantasmagoric journey filled with bloody vengeance and laced with deadly fire.
Very nice. Good intro.
I wish I'd written that intro. So what was your, do you remember when we saw this?
I do, for sure.
Okay. So what was your takeaway the first time? This is only second time, or have you watched it in between?
No, just the second time. This is a special film.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely appreciated it the first time, but I was a bit taken aback because it's a wild ride and it's very unique in its style. But I appreciated it more the second time.
I think I did too.
I love this film. I think I can declare this to be one of my favorite films of the 2010s, horror films.
Okay.
And I think it's one of the best horror films from the 2010s. It's just so unique and special. And what it's trying to do, I think it achieves. It's not for everybody.
No.
Because it's
stylistically
a bit extreme and out there, but or a lot. I recommended this to a student. And he's like, "Oh yeah, I watched Mandy with my parents on the weekend." And he was like, "It was really out there." So yeah, if you're just
said not safe for home.
Yeah, I kind of forgotten some of the scenes. And then rewatching this time, I was like, "Oh, oops, maybe that was a mistake." But
we'll save that for spoilers.
Yeah. But anyways, it's Nicolas Cage is great, but everything about this film, the music, obviously the lighting is huge, the cinematography, and trying to figure out what the film is trying to achieve. I think. Because at its core, it's a very simple premise. It's like a revenge film.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like John Wick on steroids or something. But there's so much else going on. And I appreciate it more the second time. So even though there's a discrepancy between the critic score and the audience score, I do think I would recommend this to anybody. I think it's worth watching because it's so special. And if you like it, I think you'll really like it.
I think part of the problem with films like this and the audience score is how it might have been marketed. Because I think sometimes the audience reacts to, hey, that's not what I expected, or that's not what the ads showed me. It's not what I thought I was going to get. And so, at least for me, my experience when that happens is that I'm less open-minded to what I did see because I was anticipating what I thought I was going to get.
That's very fair. And I didn't actually go and watch a trailer for Mandy this time around. Like I don't recall how it was marketed.
No, me neither. I didn't watch a trailer either.
So it'd be interesting to see if there is a discrepancy between how the film plays out versus how it was originally pitched.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I think this has something, and I think we talked about this. Sorry, I'll finish that thought. This has something for everybody, but I think the cool thing is you and I, I'm not spoiling anything here, but you remember the bathroom scene.
Yes.
And we had both commented because Nicolas Cage, I mean, although I make fun of him a lot, and he makes fun of himself, by the way, this is not just me making fun of him. He's so over the top sometimes. And there's every once in a while, there's a role where it's like that totally fits the style of the film and the character. And to his credit, I mean, Nicolas Cage is so prolific. It's not surprising that every once in a while he chooses a film that totally fits his over-the-top style. Yeah. And so this one, I think, really suits his craziness because that's where they want the character to go.
At times, but don't you actually, I almost feel like overall, in totality, he's a bit more subdued maybe than in other films.
Oh, for sure.
And he does a pretty convincing job. Like sometimes he comes off as kind of a meme or caricature, but
totally.
Like I think this might be his best.
Get off the bike.
It's so good.
The bees, not the bees.
Yeah, that one. Wicker Man is a whole other story. If Wicker Man is the bottom of Nicolas Cage, this is probably near the top in terms of what he's able to accomplish here.
And he was really good in, was it Mom and Dad? Is that what it was called? Or
oh yeah, I mean, I think he's good in a lot, and I appreciate that he chooses films that are really different. Like I don't get the sense he's just choosing anything for a payday, like a Samuel L. Jackson may have at times, even though I do love Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah, because everything seems like when you watch it, it feels to me like, oh, this is a Nicolas Cage film. Because he does choose those quirky, kind of odd,
often stylized, like Color Out of Space or Willy's Wonderland. Even though we didn't love it, like it's unique. This film for sure. Like in the last couple of years, I mean, he's pretty much, I can't even say that. I was going to say exclusively in the horror genre, but he's done a Western.
Yeah.
He did the one that's kind of a parody of himself.
Yes.
It's got a long title.
I was going to say, I'm thinking of The Unbearable Lightness of Being, but it's like something like that.
He's cranking out like 2 or 3 films a year, and
Yeah.
they're all pretty interesting.
And I think to give him credit, I think a lot of what he does is indie as well.
For sure.
And so, I mean, I think that's a really interesting approach. I mean, for what I may think from time to time of his performances, I think an actor, a performer of his stature, I mean, he's not, Sidney Poitier or whatever, but it would be easy for him to only do studio films given his longevity in the business and I think his bankability.
Yeah.
So I think it's quite brave of him to choose indie films that it's a crapshoot. Like you just don't know how it's going to be received.
Pig was another one.
Oh,
Kind of like a drama.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
He's done. Yeah, they're just all interesting. And
Yeah, I'll
unique.
give him that. I'll
Yeah.
give him that.
Yeah.
Like he is an interesting performer. And I think like my sense, although I haven't watched a lot, I do think he just likes performing. I think he likes the process of making films, which is why he's so prolific.
Yeah, maybe the challenge of choosing interesting roles, or like Renfield was not a great film, but I thought he was good in it. I think he was the highlight.
I think they underutilized him in Renfield. I think I think the film could have been better if they had focused more on him.
Agreed.
Which I don't usually say about Nicolas Cage films.
Because I made a note of that bathroom scene as well, and I think though it's kind of over the top, I felt like it worked and it was earned, and I actually feel like he pulled it off. And I'm not sure everyone could have.
No.
Like that scene could have gone sideways or felt just out of place, but I thought it worked for me.
It did for me too. And I mean, just to get off Nicolas Cage for a second, I think Andrea Riseborough was really good too.
For sure.
Short-lived performance in the movie, but I think she was really good. And Linus Roach is really good as kind of the demagogue, the religious person. And there's just some interesting characters in this one too.
Yeah, so for people who have not seen it, like the director was saying that he was not allowed to watch horror films as a kid. And so what he would do, so this was, it takes place in 1983.
Yeah.
I was born in 1983. So I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting.
There you go.
So he wasn't allowed to watch horror films, but he said he would go to music stores and he'd see these metal album covers. That was kind of like cosmic fantasy. And he'd read the stories on the backs of the albums.
Oh, interesting.
And he would kind of conceptualize like these kind of horror stories. And so that's kind of what this film is. It's kind of, if you picture those like 80s metal album colors with like fantastical cosmic imagery, and then those sort of fantasy stories. And he's basically taken that and made it into a movie.
That I didn't realize that. That totally makes sense to me, because I was just going to say, and I should look it up. I think 1983. Did you ever see the movie Heavy Metal? It's an animated.
Oh, I know Heavy. Yes, I saw it at like a party, so I was kind of half watching it. But it's that was inspiration, I think, as well.
I can see that because it is cosmic, and of course, I think it was probably made by a bunch of dudes, because there's a lot of scantily clad women with large breasts in that film wielding huge swords. Nothing phallic about it at all. And I remember going to the theater. I can't remember if I saw it 2 or 3 times in the theater.
That's the thing, I wasn't allowed to watch it as a kid.
Yeah. And I think I might have like just crossed my fingers and bought a ticket, because sometimes they called you on your age and sometimes they didn't. But I had a lot of peach fuzz and whatever, so I thought I could get away with it. Anyway, we totally digress.
Because they're wearing like, there's obviously a lot of homage to like metal.
Totally.
He's got like the Black Sabbath t-shirt, and Motley Crue. Like they're wearing their like metal shirts. There's lots of metal music in the film. And then the color palette and sort of the panoramic sort of cosmic imagery is just very evocative of those album covers, I guess Iron Maiden. Like I'm not a metal guy.
Me neither.
So I don't think I would have picked up on all the references, but I could see if you were a real metalhead from that era, you would probably really appreciate this film, because I think a lot of those references would be lost on me, but clearly this is like a tribute to, I think, that era of metal.
Yeah, and those were pretty, like, I was in high school in 80. My brother was a metalhead, Judas Priest and Iron Maiden. And it's funny because I loved, I still love them, Iron Maiden album covers with Eddie on the front. And even though I didn't like the music, and I appreciate the music now, I actually quite like that era. It's not death metal, it's just kind of heavy rock and roll. But I was a geek and I was into, whatever, other things, Spandau Ballet. And so anyway, but I loved the album covers. They were always so cool.
I agree with that because I agree. I don't really like the music. I think I tried it based on, this album cover looks amazing.
Yeah, exactly.
The music doesn't do much for me, but yeah. Censor, was it that we watched? We reviewed in season 3.
Yes.
That kind of red and blue.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Like this
Lots
kind of
color.
reminded me of Censor. They're definitely playing with, there's like a red hue over.
Yes.
I think a lot of the scenes with Mandy and red, but playing with that red and blue. I don't know if that's like cosmic light or whatever. But this film really oozes and is dripping with style.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And that color, I mean, that's a big one. Big takeaway for me is there's that very stylized scene where Mandy's walking on the side of the road and the van passes her by and everything slows down and it goes red.
Yes.
Yeah, super interesting. I mean, visually, this film is very, very interesting in what it does. And there's some character actors that you'll go, oh, hey, I recognize him.
It reminded me a little bit of David Lynch as well.
Yeah, interesting. How so?
In style. Just it's a little bit abstract at times. And it has that dark imagery. He kind of flirts with that horror tone.
He does. Yeah.
What's the one with Canadian girl, Naomi Watts?
David Lynch
film. Yeah, she goes to like Hollywood.
Oh, like shoot. It's not Lost Highway. It's what was that called?
Sorry, audience.
Yes.
So yeah, Lost Highway and that one, like to me,
it's not LA Confidential, is it? No, that's not him.
It'll come to. I'll look it up in a sec. But yeah, it kind of reminded me of those films.
Mulholland Drive.
Mulholland Drive.
Yeah,
yes, thank you. Good job. Yeah, so I kind of got vibes of Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway a little bit watching this.
Lost Highway, I can totally see. I haven't seen Mulholland Drive in long enough that it doesn't ring a bell. But I just maybe a year or so or 18 months ago watched Lost Highway.
Yeah,
and I'm like, yeah, I could see.
Like I think in style, because those films don't have often like natural conversation. They have like very, the way they do dialogue, it's very deliberate and delivered in a way that doesn't feel natural and authentic, but it's stylized. And I think that kind of reminded me of this film.
And there's again, visually, is it spoiler if I talk about the trip scene, do you think?
No, I think it's okay.
Because visually there's a great, I don't think this is spoiling anything because it's just a visual element of the film, but there's a great segment, I thought, where Mandy is tripping. I don't know what they've given her, but it's
like a special form of LSD or something.
Yeah.
Like it's.
But then they have that big thing that stings her or does something.
That's true. I wonder if that's where they get it from.
Yeah, I don't know, but it's like the thing that they pull out of the jar is terrifying. But my point is there's lots of weird color and stuff, but there's a great part of that scene where I think the director is trying to relay what it's like to have a trip, and he's melding Linus Roach's character. Do you remember his name? I can't remember his name. Jeremiah and Mandy's faces are kind of melding in and out of one another, and that just really drew me in, that scene.
Yeah, I've never done LSD, but
me neither.
Clearly, I think that's what he's going for here as well. Like the whole movie probably feels like an acid trip a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because with the colors and the blending of things and
yeah, lots of close-ups and like focusing on like light and like he'll zoom in on like a flame and like linger there for a bit. And also everything fades.
Yes.
Like there's no hard cuts. Everything kind of fades into each other. It has a very like ethereal quality to it. And he takes acid at one point too, right? The monstrous acid. So and then the film gets even crazier.
Yeah.
So I think this film is a bit Lynchian in that it's a little abstract and out there, And I think that disconnect between the critic score and the audience score is it's not super accessible if you're just used to watching your Hollywood film. Like it's.
And I wonder too, like, I mean, he's obviously Cabinet of Curiosities, I think was last year. I don't know how many seasons. I started watching it. It didn't draw me in. So they said that Panos Cosmatos has done that, but I wonder, like,
Have you seen his other one?
No,
me neither.
But it seems like, I know he's a writer as well and has done writing credits on a bunch of stuff, but it seems like this was a well received by critics. I don't know if he couldn't get money to make another film, or like, I don't know why he hasn't done anything else. I mean, it's been 5 years.
It's true.
So probably 6 or 7 since this was in pre-production and then production.
Yeah, because I'd be very keen to see another film from him, and I should go and watch his original one,
especially if it was in this genre.
Mm-hmm.
This does have the bees on your shirt.
Yeah, it does.
The bees.
Oh, a Nicolas Cage shirt.
Okay, so we've talked about the visuals a little bit. I was trying to remember, because I didn't take notes when I was watching it, in terms of the like soundtrack or the soundscape. Sound design. Does it?
Oh, I love the sound design in this.
Okay.
It's kind of got that synth 80s.
Yeah.
Some metal as well, because I think there's tribute to metal.
That I do remember, yeah.
And yeah, just this film has an ethereal quality. Like you just sit and kind of experience it, and it just kind of washes over you, like the color and I thought the music for sure, and the sound. It's it just really hits all of your senses in a pretty strong way, in a very atypical way, I think, of most films.
Yeah, and I think if you like I tend to be partial to revenge films.
Yeah, me too.
And this hit all the buttons for me.
Yeah, but for me, it's not about, or the thing I liked about it wasn't necessarily the plot of the revenge.
No.
I just think stylistically, but that helps for sure. If it seems like we're struggling to...
We don't want to give away anything until the spoiler section.
Yeah, and if you've not seen it, you'll get why it's a little bit hard to describe, because it's very different stylistically. Yeah,
I mean, the beginning of the film, you get maybe snippets of that, of the stylistic side. Not a lot, though. I mean, Cage plays a lumberjack. It seems like she's an artist maybe or something. She's also working at a local store or whatever. And they're kind of in the boonies. They seem to be well away from, sort of a town or whatever. So the beginning of the film, kind of shows an idyllic life. They hang out together, they watch TV, they sleep in this lovely room. She's reading and drawing and doing different things, and he's off to work being a lumberjack, and that's okay. And then I would say, and I mean, obviously there's a change before this, but I think the turning point of the film is that bathroom scene.
Yes.
Like that's when everything kind of goes batshit crazy.
Yeah, I think I was reading there's like a kind of a tonal transition from grief to rage.
Yes.
And he kind of goes through those cycles maybe. But I think that turns it into rage mode. And the second act of the film
100%
is more the revenge portion.
Yeah.
And the first act of the film is kind of the setup and the sense of loss.
Yeah. I mean, there's no getting around the fact that, the first part of the film definitely kind of leads us down the primrose path, and you don't really know what to expect. Although there's hints of Jeremiah's character being pretty despicable.
Definitely. Yeah. He's pretty unlikable from the very beginning.
Yeah, and it really plays on that kind of the stereotypes of a cult.
Absolutely. Yeah, I heard this is kind of a reference to like the Manson murders and the cult around Charles Manson.
Interesting.
Because the prominence of the female characters and just that era and drugs and cult of personality. And yeah. So I could see that when I read that.
I don't know how old he is. I wonder...
Who's that? Jeremiah?
No, Panos Cosmatos.
Oh, yeah.
The reason I asked that is because I remember, even though it happened long before this, I remember in high school, the nonfiction book by, what the heck's it'll come to me. Anyway, the nonfiction book, Helter Skelter, written by the prosecutor, Vincent Bugliosi. that was having a bit of a resurgence in the early 80s because you had the satanic panic going on,
Yes.
right? And so the Manson thing kind of had a bit of a resurgence because people were looking back. I mean, it was only, 15 years before this, and all through the 70s, because Manson was still trying for parole, and you had different books coming out and all these different things. And so I remember there being that sense of panic. And
Yeah, that makes sense to me because I was thinking, the Charles Manson murders, that's like 1969.
Yeah.
So this is 1983. But if there was like in pop culture a resurgence of interest in that topic, then that makes sense. Because I do get the feeling this is a bit of a time capsule element to this. We actually talked about that with Lost Boys.
Yes.
But here as well, because it even says at the beginning, like 1983.
Yeah.
And he was talking about like the importance of those album covers to him in 1983.
Yeah.
So maybe if the Manson murders were I was like born in 1983, so I don't remember what was going on, but that makes sense to me.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of a pop culture resurgence. I just remember getting my hands on the book,
Okay.
Helter Skelter. But I do remember, because of the satanic panic, that, Manson comes up in that discussion, because there's, I think, erroneously, there's a connection to Manson and Satan worship and all the rest of it. Like I don't.
Well, there's an element of that too here, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Because is it like an ocarina or something that the guy plays to summon the motor demons?
Yeah. That's true.
There's even some blood drinking in this one as well, which is funny. That's the third film this season where
I know, it's crazy, eh?
This is not on purpose.
You know what
because they kind of summon those demons, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, do you think, speaking of the 1983, if that hadn't been so prominent at the beginning, like if they hadn't set the scene, I don't feel like there's a lot that really centers it in that era, because they're living out in the bush. Like I didn't notice, other than the music, I didn't notice necessarily any styles from the time, or like the culty people seem to be in the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Both Red and Mandy are just wearing like jeans and t-shirt. Like they could be any time.
But the t-shirt's like Black Sabbath and Motley Crue maybe like puts it in that time period,
sure,
as opposed to being like a generic t-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, obviously.
And those metal t-shirts, wasn't that kind of a thing?
Oh, 100%.
Is that early 80s?
That's 80s, yeah.
Or is that 70s as well?
Well, like I would say from like late 70s onwards, because I know a lot of, metalheads wanted to show their pride even during the disco era, because it's like, no, this is what I listen to, right?
Yeah.
But for sure in the early 80s, like those kinds of t-shirts, they were, if you had the Rush 2112 t-shirt, or you had Judas Priest, or you had Eddie on a t-shirt or whatever. Definitely the era of those.
Because there's 3 chapters.
Yes.
There's Shadow Mountains, 1980, and they each have like a title card that looks kind of in the font style of a metal band or whatever. So Shadow Mountains, 1983. And then Children of the New Dawn. And then the third chapter is Mandy. So just him feeling the need to put the year 1983 on there is kind of interesting.
Yeah. I didn't seek out any interviews with him.
Okay.
It'd be interesting. I mean, I did watch a couple of things with Linus Roach and the director and Nicolas Cage, kind of just talking. Because apparently Nicolas Cage, this was the interview I saw. Panos Cosmatos wrote the Jeremiah character for Nicolas Cage.
Oh, okay.
And Nicolas Cage, when he auditioned for that character, wasn't feeling it. And he wanted to do the Red character. And initially, Cosmatos said no.
Oh, interesting. That's cool.
And then he kind of went away and thought about it and, got back to Cage and said, yeah, that makes sense. I guess Cage maybe felt that there was more for him to do, or the Red character spoke to him more.
Yeah.
So 100%. That was a very interesting story, because as I was watching the film, and I didn't know that the first time, but this time is like, would Cage, I think he would have made a good Jeremiah, but
I think he could do the Jeremiah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think he's better suited for the Red character in terms of his performances.
Yeah.
Because Jeremiah, although there are moments where there's flashes of anger, he's fairly well contained for the most part. Red's character is not. It allows Cage to kind of unleash as the film progresses.
Yep, that's true.
And I think that's better suited for a Cage performance than the Jeremiah character.
Yep, I can see that. Although Nicolas Cage is so eclectic, I think he can just
he could
do anything.
Yeah,
he can do everything.
Yeah, he could have.
A few other thoughts in terms of putting it in that time period. The Cheddar Goblin commercial.
Oh yeah, that's awesome.
Like that was kind of evocative of those commercials.
Absolutely.
From that time period, and even like the Cheddar Goblin, the look apparently was based off of Ghoulies, which I think was a movie from this time period. And also, like, do you remember Boglins? No. As a kid, my parents wouldn't let me get one, but it was this little puppet.
I was in high school, remember?
Fair enough.
During this time.
A little bit of age difference here. So Boglins were like these little like ghoul hand puppets, but they were like slimy, and they kind of look like the Cheddar Goblin. I was reading about this Cheddar Goblin commercial, so apparently there's
this like great name.
It really is.
Goblin.
There's this Cheddar Goblin macaroni and cheese ad in the film, and these kids are like eating their mac and cheese, but this Cheddar Goblin is like vomiting mac and cheese all over these kids.
So good.
So apparently they had to shoot that commercial for 6 hours. And these kids they went through 20 gallons of mac and cheese, just dumping it on these kids' heads for more than 5 hours. And I thought that was hilarious.
That is funny, but horrific in a way too. I can't imagine being doused with mac and cheese.
Yeah.
Now, what's the really terrible Goblin kind of film? You know, they've got the meme.
Troll 2.
Troll 2. Even though there was no Troll 1.
Yeah.
That brings back memories of like the Cheddar Goblin.
Totally.
Brings back memories of that, right?
I can see that.
And I was thinking about that. I was watching. It was like, oh man, this is totally a Trolls moment. And there were those Trolls dolls as well, right?
Yeah.
Even though I was in high school, I do remember that.
So I do feel there is like a time capsule element to this.
Yeah,
film.
I agree.
Yeah.
Now, so we're about 35 minutes in. Do we want to say, okay, because I'd like to talk about a couple of things, but we need to get into spoilers.
For sure, yeah.
So are we?
Yeah, I think we're good to move into the spoiler section at this rate.
Yeah, we're good. So,
we got to recommend or not.
Oh, okay. Well, I thought, we sort of already did this. 100% recommend for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's 100% recommend. I don't think everyone will necessarily like it.
No.
But I think it's worth trying, and I think it's worth experiencing. I do think it is a special film. This is a film where you want to give it your full attention, I think, to just get into the film and what it's trying to do. So this is not like a cell phone scrolling horror film. You want to like put your phone away and really just enjoy it.
And even though there's, whatever, a 24% difference between critic and audience, the audience score is still pretty strong. 67%, 2/3 of the audience enjoyed the film or liked it or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as strong as the critic score, probably because they weren't picking up on a lot of the same things that critics would. But I still think it's a reasonable.
It's just very avant-garde in its style.
It is, and
it takes a bit of work to figure out what's going on at times. But it's excellent. Like, I definitely think it's one of the best films of the 2010s. Probably the best film of that year. I didn't go back and look at my top 10 list, but I think we both had it on our top 10 list.
And even if you don't like Nicolas Cage, it's a solid performance, and it really suits his style of performance.
Yeah, agreed.
So we're 2 thumbs up.
Yeah. And if you like metal, 80s metal, then I think you'll love this film.
Yeah. So spoilers. Okay.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
What do you want to talk about in spoilers? Do you have a...
Well, yeah, I think that transition from... I think you are correct in identifying that when he has that breakdown in the bathroom, it's a transition both from like grief to rage, but then like reality to fantasy.
Yeah,
And I feel like the second act of the film has like a far more fantastical feel to it.
absolutely. Yeah.
And it has, again, like I think of this time period, like Dungeons and Dragons was kind of a big thing. And he kind of ends up going on this fantastical epic quest. And he goes and gets his weapons, the crossbow, which was called the Reaper.
Yeah.
And so he goes to this contact he has. And the implication I thought was he is going to reclaim this crossbow. Did you get that sense? He's like, I need my crossbow or something.
Yeah, that's the sense I got, because I can't remember that actor's name, but he was in Predator, and he's been in a bunch of different Schwarzenegger films, I think.
So almost the implication there is he had done something like this before? Or like it's interesting that he had this weapon that he was going back to reclaim.
I got a sense, yes, that it was his, but that he's a hunter. And
Okay,
he's
so
a
maybe-
bow hunter.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I think I think there is a line where he says, well, what are you hunting?
Oh, that's true.
So it's possible that he's done it before,
Yeah.
but I got the sense that he's a pretty low key, like, yeah, he's got a physical job. He hunts, yada, yada, but he's not necessarily a violent man.
No, but he turns into...
Yes.
And someone else made an interesting observation that, and again, I think this is part of the time capsule element, that he almost transitions into like a Jason Voorhees type character. I think the lake that he's at is actually called Crystal Lake.
Oh, really?
And he forges this like
Yes.
crazy battle axe, and the way he stands. And at first he has to vanquish the demons, but then after he vanquishes the demons, like he almost becomes the monster.
Yeah.
And he starts hunting down the cult members and just killing them off in sort of a perhaps like a Jason-like fashion. So again, in the early 80s, I think is probably when Friday the 13th would have come out. I'll check and see if it's 1983 because that'd be interesting. But someone was looking at the imagery and a few references to Friday the 13th, and that Nicolas Cage almost turns into this like Jason Voorhees like serial killer figure with his axe and like his brooding kind of look. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting.
Now, are the demons, this was even the second time around, I wasn't sure. Are the demons fantastical? Like there's something unhuman about them.
Well, would you argue that demons are by their nature fantastical?
Well, yes, but sorry, I'm just using the term that they use, like the motorcycle demons or whatever. But are they really demons? Or because isn't there? I thought there was a reference in the show, in the movie, where somebody says, I think it was the drug dealer, says that they got a really bad batch of something that kind of turned them.
Oh, that's interesting.
Into something.
Because that's that crazy LSD that he like takes, and that's what maybe turns him into that like super monster type thing. Yeah, that's true. I mean, again, that's kind of a fantastical idea, but you're right. Maybe they are not like demons from hell, but they were people who were kind of turned demonic by overexposure to this crazy LSD.
Yeah, I mean, that's the sense that I got, because when he wakes up, like, and this part I didn't. Well, anyway, it doesn't matter. So when he wakes up,
the film's certainly abstract in some ways.
It is, and I don't think it matters. Like, this isn't a key point. This isn't a key takeaway of the film. I didn't get a good enough look, because they seem to be wearing like masks and like these outfits and whatever. I never saw faces, so I wasn't sure like what's behind the facade.
That's true. You don't ever see their faces.
Yeah. He just goes to town on them in their lair. I mean, I do think,
like, do you see it as like his psychological descent into hell almost, to like hunt them down?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Even like if you look at the very end of the film, there's almost, I feel like you could almost read that as having achieved his vengeance.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost the phoenix reborn out of the ashes. Like he comes out a different man.
Do you feel like he almost has become a demon himself? Like he's kind of forfeited his... Oh no, what was the thing that someone said that Mandy, the third chapter, like Mandy is almost like become like a god to him.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like a demigod, like a wrathful demigod. Like,
yeah, I can see it.
I'm like, oh, that's interesting, because I think those metal of that era, and I don't know for sure. But your reference to like the cosmic horror, that they almost have these like godlike figures.
Yeah, like that's an interesting point because I'm not sure if I'm misreading. I felt like at the end, so we're in the spoiler section. I felt like at the end when he finally gets to Jeremiah and the church is burning, that's kind of Red being reborn. Like he's achieved his vengeance and now he can go on with life.
Yeah, I can see that. Although, could you also read it as he's almost become like a demonic force?
Yeah, I think you could. I think it's
the
open.
burning of the cross is almost like he is turned away from that.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Christ biblical references.
Yeah.
Even like, because he's got the barbed wire on him.
Yeah.
He's almost on something like a cross at the beginning.
Oh, yeah,
And they show a
oh,
part
yes. Yeah.
And they show a part with his hand and has a hole through it.
Yeah, it's a nail.
A nail,
He
exactly.
spiked him. Yeah.
Which is
totally
clearly a Christ reference. And then Jeremiah makes a comment once at the beginning when they kill Mandy. He said the mistake Jesus made was sacrificing himself and not somebody else.
Yes, I remember that.
So I guess I kind of read the film as like Red starts as like a very pure character, but he trades his like humanity and purity for like demonic power to enact revenge for Mandy. But in the process of doing that, he almost becomes like a demonic force himself. So I almost saw it as like he almost becomes like a demon by going through those trials and getting his revenge. And he almost turns to dark powers, especially maybe consuming that LSD, which the demons had done before him. So that's sort of like the price he had to pay to get revenge. But I think
I like that reading better than my reading. I like that's a darker.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. And yes, absolutely. I think that's all there.
And the cool thing about this film, like I'm not pretending to have it all figured out. And I think you would have to watch this movie like 20 times.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I really appreciate it. I like those movies that you have to go back and watch over and over again. And they're kind of like we talked about, like the puzzle metaphor to try and figure it out. And I do think there is something there, but yeah, I think we could go watch it more.
And I think, I don't know, it could be the devices that I've watched it on, but I found, and maybe your 75-inch TV would be better for this, but I felt like there might be some things kind of in the shadows or things that I couldn't quite clearly make out because it's quite a dark film.
Yeah.
That way. And that always drives me crazy because if I'm supposed to get something from this, make it light enough that I can see.
Like Hereditary does that. So there's like things hidden in the dark. And if you don't have good black levels on your TV, something you might not pick up on it. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. And I mean, we haven't talked about, I alluded to the fact that, and we've talked about him going from grief to rage. So the premise of the film is that Jeremiah is this cult leader, and like just with a glance, he becomes infatuated with Mandy. She walks by the van that they're driving up this road. It seems like a logging road somewhere. I don't know where it was filmed, but anyway, and he gets his kind of second in command. He says, "You need to get me that girl." And so they end up finding where Mandy is and where they live and yada, yada. And then they take them both. They end up showing up at their house, and that's a pretty scary scene with the demons. And so they give Mandy this drug, whatever it is.
With the thing, yeah.
And I think, this is really interesting too, because I don't know if, first of all, I don't know if I'm interpreting it correctly. And secondly, I don't know whether it was intended that way, but it seems to me that there's a scene where I talked about already, the LSD scene where, faces are blurring or whatever. And Jeremiah is really full of himself.
Oh, yeah.
And he disrobes and she starts laughing. Now, I don't know if she's laughing at his dick, if she's just going off on a giggle, thing because of the drugs. But it seems to me, and I don't know if you interpret it this way as well, that his rage is because of her laughter.
Totally.
And he sees that as a slight against his godlike masculinity.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I agree. And I think what he was trying to do by giving her the LSD, I think he was trying to like control her and bring her into the cult and she just defies him,
Yeah.
just laughs in his face. I don't know if it was about the size of his.
Well, that's what I wondered, right?
I mean, that would make sense too, but definitely that's not the reaction he was hoping for. And
Yes.
it's like an act of defiance on her point, I think.
Yeah. And then, I mean, I don't know that I've seen, because you actually don't see, like, visually see her be killed. All you see is there's a bonfire
Mm-hmm.
and she's in this big burlap sack and they hang her up and you see the sack. That had a visceral impact on me more than some of the scenes I've seen where you see someone decapitated or whatever. Because again, it's that show, don't tell.
Mm-hmm.
And just the idea, like I really could feel, it's like, holy cow, that's a brutal scene. Like someone hanging over a fire and being consumed. Yeah, it was just that threw me for a loop, that scene.
For sure. And for him, like he doesn't get to see her one last time, but he knows she's dying.
Yeah.
And also maybe it planted the tiny little seed of like, was she actually in there or are they trying to mess
I wondered
with
that
him?
too. Yeah.
Because it could have been like an animal or so. Yeah. Someone
Did they
else.
take, or did they,
Because he wanted her, so I wasn't sure. Is he actually killing her or does he just want Nicolas Cage to think
and they
that?
never follow up on, like you would think, because I wondered the same thing, particularly the first time I saw it. But when he tracks down the cult members, you never see her
Mhm.
anywhere. So it seems to me that
No,
that's,
I think she was in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
um,
Also, they're playing with the juxtaposition of love, because you see like Red and Mandy's love is very like wholesome and like based on mutual respect and mutual love for each other. Whereas Jeremiah's sense of love, because I think he says like, "Oh, I'll show you what love is."
that's right.
And he gets one of his underlings to like play Russian roulette and put the gun to her head and shoot. And he's like, "That's true love," or
Yeah,
something. She
yeah.
loves me so much that she'll do that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I think they're playing with a theme there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, arguably, and I don't want to go too far down this road, but a loving God, Christ dying for humanity's sins, like that love of humanity. Like, I think that's all wrapped up
100%.
in what Cosmatos is working with there, what he's playing with.
And if you go back to Charles Manson, I think
100%.
he wasn't involved in the murders, but
Yeah.
he had those girls go and do the murder
Absolutely.
for him. So I
Yeah.
feel like the Russian roulette and setting them to do the murder is very similar. Like, oh yeah, Charles Manson loves us, but
Yeah.
in that kind of way, not in a.
And I think, I mean, I feel, and I'm not a cult expert, nor do I claim to, have done a lot of research on this, but my layman's understanding of cults and manipulation, I think they got that part. If they're basing it on Manson, which is hard not to as a cult leader, if they're basing it on Manson, it's that manipulation and that idea of, well, if you really love me, then you'll do this. And I know, what was it? I think I mentioned this to you. So after seeing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood,
Yep.
I went back and I was listening to a podcast and they referenced another podcast, which I think was like 8 or 10 episodes. It's what's the name of the podcast? You Must Remember This. And it's about Hollywood and kind of darker stories, but they did a whole season on Manson and the impact he had on Hollywood because he was so tangled up in the music industry and in Hollywood, that had an impact on people for years after it happened.
I love that about Once Upon a Time in Hollywood because I didn't know it was about Charles Manson.
Yeah.
And then halfway through, I'm like, oh, this is so interesting.
Yeah. The concept, and it's on my list to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah, me too.
Because I think Brad Pitt is so good in that film. They really, I mean, I'd be curious to know, and I'm sure it's out there somewhere. I mean, that scene with Brad Pitt and the actor who's supposed to be Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
I wonder, I mean, it seems very, what's the word? Apocryphal for Tarantino. Like, I wonder, because he's so much about the lore of film and Hollywood and whatever. I wonder, like, what his inside track is, like whether that's a true story that somebody has.
Apparently, like you hear, like most people only have reverence for Bruce Lee.
Yeah.
But Tarantino was saying like he was kind of a dick. Like all the stuntmen hated him.
Yeah.
Because he would go hard and hit them all the time.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that before. Yeah. That he didn't, no pun intended, didn't pull any punches.
That's right.
And was hard. And apparently Steven Seagal was like that too.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not comparing Steven Seagal and Bruce Lee, but I know we're digressing totally. I just watched, is it Michael Jai White or whatever, the black martial artist? He's been in a bunch of stuff. Is that his name? Michael Jai White, I think.
I actually don't follow a whole lot of martial arts films, so I'm not sure.
Me neither, but he's constantly showing up on my Instagram feed. So I must have liked something somewhere along the line. But I saw a little interview with him where they were saying, because he's a newer generation than like the Van Dammes and the Steven Seagal. And Steven Seagal famously is Aikido.
Aikido, yeah.
And I don't feel like White was throwing any shade here. But basically because they were saying to him, well, who do you think, would it be Van Damme or would it be Steven Seagal? And he goes, look, I'm not trying to do this, but Steven Seagal's not a fighter.
That's all I've heard too. He's kind of a joke.
He's not a martial artist. And Aikido, I did 2 years of Aikido when I was in university because they had a club. First of all, the whole philosophy behind it is non-aggressive. Mm-hmm. And secondly, you don't have any offensive moves. Aikido is redirecting energy, right? And Aikido was meant as a martial art in the time of swords. So after you get some of your basic moves down, then you move to the Bokan, and you're doing a lot of sword moves and like getting inside somebody's circle to block a sword or redirect a punch. There's nothing aggressive or offensive about it. And basically, so I don't know why this came into my mind.
There's lots of fighting in the movie, so it's totally relevant.
It's totally germane. So anyway, he said, look, he would not win a fight, an MMA fight against Van Damme or whatever, even if he was fit, which he's not these days. And I'm not one to talk. But I don't make martial arts movies. So there you go. So anyway, White said, yeah, he just wouldn't win a fight because he's not a fighter. Mm-hmm. Yes, he might redirect something, but he's got nothing offensive to work with. He doesn't have any proactive thing that you could hurt somebody with. You're just like you can twist a wrist and do this and do that. But if somebody,
you see all of his demonstrations of all these guys running at him, he does something, they go flying.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, I don't buy it. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, I digress. Maybe I'll have to cut that out. I don't know. Okay, so we talked about Mandy wriggling in the bag over the fire. We talked about Jeremiah. There's a great chainsaw scene.
There's a few, again, I don't know if this is a time capsule element or something, but there's a reference to Ronald Reagan and him trying to block pornography and abortion. Do you remember that comment?
I don't remember it in the film, no.
Okay. And I thought it was interesting because there's one fight scene where there's like pornography in the background.
That's right. I remember that. Yeah.
Like, what is going on here? Like, I don't know what he was, if that's, I just don't know. There was the one reference to it with Ronald Reagan and they have it there too. So I don't know if there's like an anti-porn element to this or if that is supposed to be like considered like a demonic form, like more in the form of love of Jeremiah and less than Mandy and Red.
I wonder also if it's just of the time, because during that time, it was when porn was transitioning into the VHS era. And so like when porn first went online, that was a major turning point for the porn industry because now everything was available on VHS.
Right.
And you could like copy films. You could kind of like when you have it online, the same idea. So
this is more stuff that puts that early 1980s.
Yeah. I wonder if it's a context, but it's also a way to tell us how nasty the demons are, that they're kind of just watching porn.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. It's a there's another scene that I interpreted and I wondered what your take on it was when he goes to see the drug dealer.
Yeah.
And there's a tiger in the cage.
Yeah.
And the drug dealer at some point releases the tiger. And I thought, okay, well, the tiger's going to attack, Nicolas Cage's character, Red. But the tiger just kind of wanders off.
Mm.
And I interpreted that this time as symbolic of Red becoming the tiger.
Yes.
Becoming the avenging tiger.
Kind of unleashing the beast
Yes,
a little bit. Like we're
exactly.
literally unleashing the beast.
Exactly.
And we're going to unleash Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Because that's exactly, I mean, I think that's when he hits the LSD. Or is
That's
it
right.
earlier?
Hitting the LSD transitions into that scene, which
Yes.
transitions into him
Yes.
turning into that, again, that more like serial killer, Jason Voorhees, perhaps
Yeah.
like character, which again, Friday the 13th was 1980. So right, the same kind of era.
So was there anything that detracted or that you felt, I'm not so sure about that? As we both spoke quite positively in the first part.
No, for me, no. Other than it's just a bit of a puzzle and it's a bit abstract and avant-garde. So you really have to pay attention.
Agreed.
And it
Yeah.
might not make perfect sense the first time you watch it, but I almost think, again, that's a pro. Like, I think it's fun to go back and watch it multiple times and try and figure out what's happening.
Me too.
But for someone who just wants to sit down on a Friday night, have some popcorn, and have an enjoyable horror film, like this may not fit that bill.
I don't think my wife would mind me saying this, but it's kind of like
she'd probably hate this, right?
I don't think. Yeah, I think it would require too much of her, and I say that not as a criticism, just that
Different people look for different things.
Absolutely,
from entertainment,
and she and I have had this discussion where, I often like films that I have to puzzle over or that I have to go back and rewatch, and that's the complete opposite. She wants something candy floss that she can scroll her phone, kind of pick up snippets. Love is Blind, right? She's watched every season, because you don't have to really pay attention. You know what the premise of the show is. You can see the drama happen, but you don't have to go, well, how did they get there? Like, how did they get from there to there?
Yeah.
Whereas in a film like this, you need to pay attention because there's hints dropped along the way. There's little bits happening here and there. And I just feel like, like quite a few of the films that we've talked about, and I think we both come from the same place. I like a film that I have to engage in and I have to pay attention.
Yeah.
I mean, doesn't mean I don't like fluff, because sometimes I just like Halloween or something that I know what's going to happen. I don't really have to pay attention, but I prefer typically films like this where, what did they do there? Let me watch it again or rewind it or do whatever. I think
it's film for film buffs, not for casual moviegoers, probably. But if you consider yourself a film fan, or I think you'll love it. Yeah.
And I think that, again, that coming back to the discrepancy between audience and critic score, I think a lot of people just want to go and be entertained and not really have to think. And that's fine, because that's what entertainment's for.
Yeah.
But I agree. I think if you're a real fan of whether it's horror or just filmmaking and style and those kinds of things, then you might like this because you have to pay attention and you have to like the Ronald Reagan thing, or it's 1983, or what's going on in 1983. You've got Reagan and you've got Thatcher, very conservative time, and you've got like minor strikes in England, and you've got all this stuff going on, and you've got the social stuff with, porn, coming from kind of the underground up to like the 80s is definitely the transition period of pornography becoming pop culture.
And there's whole hour-long video essays like picking apart all the things of this film. So yeah, I think I really love that, but I guess not everyone would. Yeah. But other than that, I strongly recommend.
Yeah, there's nothing really that took me out of this story. And I appreciated the performances, the visuals, the sound design, like all of that stuff worked for me. So I would definitely be in that 91% critic score.
Yeah. And we're not even metal fans. So if you're a metal fan, you probably like that.
Yeah, you got a whole other layer there.
One other thing I want to ask you about. So at the beginning, there's a quote, and I wrote in my notes like, I got to go back and look up that quote. So at the beginning of the film, it says, "When I die, bury me deep, lay 2 speakers at my feet, put some headphones on my head, and rock and roll me when I'm dead." Do you know where that comes from?
I don't actually.
So I guess it's the final words of Douglas Roberts, who was a man convicted of kidnapping, robbery, and murder in Texas and executed on April 20th, 2005. So, yeah, I wasn't sure, like, oh, where is he pulling this quote from?
And it's funny because I had the intention to go back and look it up, and I didn't.
No, I wrote
I assumed
my notes.
it was a song lyric, but that's cool.
That's what I thought, but
Yeah.
it's actually, so I don't know what he means by that necessarily, other than
That's not his actions are cool, but that putting that quote in there is pretty cool.
yes. So I wonder, is that supposed to be part of like Red's journey? Like if you take that reading, that in the end he becomes like a demonic force,
Right.
who dies. I don't know. It's that's what I love about this film. There's just so many things that you can pick apart and analyze and look at it and figure out. And I don't think we've gotten there, but this is just another thing that like, oh, I love that. Okay, there's this quote. Where to come from? What does it mean? Why is it there? What's the significance?
I think it's more applicable to Red than to Jeremiah. Would be the only other character that I think that could relate to. But yeah, I remember watching it this time and going, oh yeah, I gotta figure out where that quote came from.
Mm-hmm.
I just assumed it was Judas Priest or Iron Maiden.
Given it's a metal movie, you would imagine it was just from some metal song. But no. Anyways.
Run to the hills. Anyway, I should probably cut that out. I don't have anything else in my notes.
Nope, me neither.
Okay, so I guess we're wrapping that up.
Yeah, so we're just gonna say going forward, the reason we want to let you know what episode we're doing next is that if you want to go and watch the film in anticipation of the next episode, so that you can sit through the spoiler section and just maybe appreciate the conversation more if you've seen it. So, what film are we doing next?
We actually,
it was actually my pick, so maybe I should say.
Sure.
Misery.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So if you've not seen Misery, it's quite a popular film. Many of you have probably seen it. But if you want to follow along for next episode, then you should check out Misery. And we also thought if there was, for the comment section.
Yeah. So if you have seen this film or you've seen other films like it, our question to you is like, what's your take on cosmic horror? Do you like, so things like this, Color Out of Space, I'm just trying to think of, any of the Cthulhu kind of movies.
Lovecraftian horror.
Yeah, Lovecraftian stuff. And there are definitely, this definitely goes further down that road than most films go, but there's elements of this in many films. So that's our question to you. And our thank you to you, listeners and viewers, because our YouTube is definitely heating up a little bit. I think our finale, not finale, but our last episode of last season's got like 300 plus views.
Which is not, by mainstream standards, still small, but for us,
it was pretty huge. It was like, wow, that's a lot of views. So thank you to those of you who are listening and watching. And if you do like what you see, then make sure, you do that. What do they do? Smash the like button and do all that stuff, subscribe. And also pass it along to somebody that you think would like film or like our banter or just need some white noise in the background. Pass it along to somebody to look at. So there you go. That's it.
Yeah. So thanks for listening, and
we'll see you in the aisles.